So Dan and I co-founded ABC, Artists Building Communities, in Oakland at the beginning of the pandemic. So the first week of the pandemic, a group of us all living in the same artist live workspace, we grew increasingly more concerned about the fate of our unhoused neighbors. At the start of the pandemic, City of Oakland cut off all social services available for people. You would have to have a phone and call social services to even access anything. So it was a complete mess. And instead of all of us wait indoors and be scared for the fate of others outside, we were proactive. So we got together, organized. The first week we fundraised for our first tiny house, and the second week we built it. And it was very easy because all of us simultaneously lost our jobs at the same time. So we had a lot of time and wanted to make a difference. So our mission is building dignity for Oakland's unhoused community members with tiny homes.
Now let's take a look at the problem being addressed. There are 10,000 unhoused community members living in Oakland. $70 million that was intended to go to addressing homelessness between the years of 2019 to 2021 was mismanaged. There were 0 records being tracked as far as outcomes for positive or negatives. So this was clearly a waste of money. And the city at this point is in its largest deficit ever. And while at the same time, they've added $80 million to addressing homelessness for the years of 2021 through 2023. And with their very recent track record, without any accountability and transparency, the path looks very similar, and there won't be any change without any new models put in place.
So since the beginning of the pandemic, we've built 15 emergency tiny houses. They're all up to California code, and 3 out of our recipients are now in permanent affordable housing, such as Section 8 and other subsidized programs. In addition to building shelter for people, we work with them towards goals of long-term housing, move-in assistance, furniture resources. We help them set up appointments for medical, mental health, dental, and even transported them to these appointments. And one nice act we did for one of the camps was they had a cat population explosion, so we created a kitty taxi where volunteers would help get the cats to and from the vets so that they could be spayed and neutered. And eviction defense was very huge. We were building on Caltrans and City of Oakland land, so it was very important for us to connect residents with lawyers who can help defend their homes as well as the property.
Moving on to how our work was completed. Our team was 100% volunteer run. This included 200 plus amazing volunteers that volunteered their time and energy in various ways since the start of 2020. Many of these people joined for just a day, and then there was a handful of core organizers that joined for a more long-term commitment. We raised over $40,000. This included a GoFundMe campaign in addition to private donors. We also threw an art show fundraiser that raised nearly enough for 2 new tiny homes. We also received national and international press, which directed donors to our GoFundMe campaign.
And a resident-led project that we participated in, where we worked with 2 different organizations at the encampment in West Oakland, where we were mostly building. We shifted, instead of building houses, we built community structures. So there was a kitchen, clinic, shower, and free store, and people from other camps would come just to use the shower in this camp. And it was a beautiful method of building. It's called cob. So it's similar to Adobe. It's made out of sand, straw, clay, and water. And it's good for the environment. It's affordable. It's fireproof, which is very important in the camps. And it's a very low barrier to entry. It's very easy. And it was quite nice to use.
All right, and let's look at why we're here today at the House of Web3. I applied as a co-creator. I was excited to be accepted, but due to the commute from Oakland to here, I wasn't sure if I'd utilize the resource as much as I have been recently. Partly due to, noticed on my acceptance email that there were a couple of talks coming up on conversations addressing homelessness. And from that point on, I realized that this place is a little different than what's typical in crypto. And talked to Anne-Marie, shared about the space. We participated in a conversation, had a really great experience. There were wonderful insights from individuals with really diverse backgrounds. In the conversation, Anne-Marie and I shared about our past work and our vision for a transitional tiny home community. Following the conversation, Yaniv reached out to us to reconnect. We learned a bit more about Yaniv's passion to address homelessness, and also we all connected over empowering the unhoused. From that conversation, we all agreed to start collaborating on a DAO, and we also were introduced to Geo, which is a decentralized browser and a tool for projects to organize data to solve real problems. The benefits we see in using a DAO, first and foremost, transparency through decentralization. The current solutions are clearly failing without accountability. Blockchain technology, with this comes trust and security to prevent issues surrounding fraud and corruption. Also access to resources that otherwise may not have been made available. And one of our favorite benefits is the ability to replicate a model. With what we're building right now, we view it as a proof of concept that can be shared across the Bay Area and beyond. How we're using Geo for the DAO today, we're using it to organize information, which includes processes, roles, materials, costs, goals, and weekly updates. Let's take a look at our community design. We feel it's incredibly important to collaborate with the residents from the very start to get their buy-in, and as well as building up trust between us and them. With our current model, it includes 10 tiny homes, a medical structure, a computer lab, an art maker and chill space, a community kitchen, dignified bathrooms and showers, on-site laundry, veggie beds, and fruit trees. And the demographic that we've identified as being underserved in the Bay Area are 25 to 40-year-olds, as many youth services end at the age of 25.
In addition to the tiny houses and other structures that we will build, we're going to partner with existing orgs to offer resources for recovery, workforce development, mental health, housing navigation. The goal is that people will be in this community for a year on average, and then they'll go into permanent affordable housing, have careers, and have everything they need to be successful. And this is going to be done through mentorship. So similar to AA and NA, where each person is paired up with a mentor who's dedicated to them in helping hold them accountable, but also reach their goals. This is integral to it. There's also going to be food, drop-in doctors, caseworker, education, and financial literacy for the residents.
Now let's look at the progress we've made with the DAO. Starting off with, we've connected with leaders of aligned projects and visited sites for inspiration. We viewed viable land and connected with the land trust to pursue land opportunities. We've organized information into Geo. We've received resident insight. We've identified needs and developed a design. We've captured costs, and we've developed a plan for a winter indoor build. What's next? Fleshing out the design, expanding on processes and roles, adding project manager before the build, finalizing a location for the winter build, securing land in Q4, along with figuring out the zoning and permitting that comes with that, and also developing partnerships with orgs to assist with community operations.
So here's a photo of the team, and we're outside of Kimba's house after we completed it. And this was the last tiny house that we built, not on a trailer, not on wheels. Because of the threat of eviction in the camps, now ABC's houses are more mobile. And it's very important for us to continue one of my favorite aspects of our organization, which is anyone can build. You can have children, families, teenagers, elders, all coming in, some without any build experience, and it's important to find a place for them to plug in, because the moment where you see that your hard work has built something tangible for someone else, that's something that we want to share with everyone possible. And here is a blueprint of our legacy design. It's 10 by 12 foot interior and 12 by 14 with the porch, and it's completely up to California code.
All right, here's a look at our art show fundraiser, Art for the Community. This event featured 30 plus Bay Area visual artists in addition to 10 musicians. And the event was headlined by Tajay from the iconic Oakland hip hop collective Hieroglyphics. And from that event, we raised nearly enough for 2 new tiny homes. Right here we have our first resident collaborator, Dimitri, and we feel it's incredibly important to have a resident say from the start in order to get their buy-in, and then also for it to be a success in their eyes and ours.
And here's one of our greatest success stories, Kelly. So this person was a huge role model for everyone around her. Not only did she mentor and provide resources for her neighbors, a lot of job opportunities as well. She nominated many people that lived near her to get tiny houses. So she's gonna be a member of our team, and we value her insight. She has way more experience than we do.
All right, and right now we have a few special guests with us tonight, and I'd like to welcome them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, introduce yourself.
What's my question?
Or your role, at least, yeah.
Oh, what's my role?
Yeah.
Is this thing hot? Okay. Lead builder. I've been doing construction forever. Then when I found the group, sorry. What's my role? Lead builder. There you go. I'll keep it short until the question comes out.
Yeah. Awesome, sweet. And Kelly? And your role.
What was the question?
What your role is with ABC?
Oh, wow. They built me a tiny home. And so as far as that goes, it's like, puts me on the forefront to make sure everybody else gets one too. Find some permanent housing and has the same opportunities that I have.
All right, now you're up, David.
Okay.
So yeah, after working on large scale projects like Salesforce Tower, what drew you to starting to build emergency tiny homes at the start of the pandemic?
Okay. Well, at the start of the pandemic is when the homeless crisis really kicked off, and there was tons of people everywhere. So I wanted to see what I could do to help, and I found ABC. And they weren't just we're going to build one house, pat ourselves in the back, and never come back again. They had like a plan to make a few homes, and ever since I've been with them, helping them lead, we built 15. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've only missed 2, so yeah, so they're pretty they're on top of it. So that's what drew me.
Rad. And Anne-Marie, if you want to just name your role, I feel like you obviously are incredible, and then I'm also really curious how the city offered solutions, which you also have experience with, are failing.
Mm-hmm. So I'm one of the co-founders, and I'm director of outreach. So my job is to connect the residents to the volunteers, to the organizers, and keep everyone in communication. But the city of Oakland has failed in providing safe transitional housing for Oakland's unhoused. There are 2 different directions people can go for transitional housing. The one is the infamous tough sheds. I don't know if San Francisco knows about these, but it's pretty much just Home Depot sheds that people live in. They have OSB board, which has chemical off-gassing, and it's not safe in just physically, but also you're paired with a random person when you go from the streets into these sheds. And
there really isn't much accountability from the program and staff for providing safety and an environment that is just conducive for people who have substance use challenges. There's a lot of triggers around, and it's a chaotic environment. And if they don't go to the tough sheds, there's also kind of hotels and apartment complexes that have been taken over by different nonprofits. Same issue. You're paired with a stranger. You don't know what you're going to get. And there really aren't mental health resources on site. And there aren't harm reduction or substance use treatment resources on site. It's just housing. And you meet with a housing locator once every 2 weeks. And that's the support that you get. It's not any way for people to actually heal. And what we're gonna do is make the opposite of that. So everyone has their own tiny house. There's a lot of resources, a lot of community, and people feel safe and are safe in this environment where they're not gonna be scared to be there. They're gonna wanna be there, and it's gonna be healthy for everyone.
Awesome. So Dan, we're curious, like, why is this a cause that you feel so strongly motivated to address?
Yeah, definitely. 10 years ago, I was sleeping in San Francisco parks, was navigating some really difficult experiences with mental health and substance use challenges. And thankfully, I had a strong support system with family and friends to make it through that. That was a long journey to make it to where I am today. But not everyone has healthy support systems. And it's important for us to look out for each other as humans. And at the very least, everyone deserves access to healing through community, through resources, and through shelter.
Yeah. And so Kelly, how has the work of ABC impacted your life?
Oh my God, it's huge.
It's a small question.
Well, ABC has given me a place where I'm safe, be able to close the door, lock it, and it's not a hut. It's not just a little storage unit. They built a home with insulation, windows, very solid. And it feels as though it's I have to succeed. I have to complete the whole succession, the circle. And I feel very emotional about that. ABC, without them, I don't know where I'd be. So as it stands right now, unhoused. I have a job and I work. I've always worked, though. I've always worked. And for whatever reasons, it's timing or who knows what it is. I just haven't had the opportunity to step forward and propel myself forward without their assistance. It's really good to have help. Help is amazing. A couple of individuals have also assisted me in like paying my cell phone bill. And that was one of the clients that I had stepped up and did that for me. And that's huge, because if you're gonna have a job, you have to have somebody who's gonna, a number where you can be reached at. Not just for 3 months, but forever, really. And both of them are angels, ABC and the woman that helped. So the impact is huge. It's enormous. And I'm ever so grateful.
Happy for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, me personally, I'm just so grateful for your wisdom and advice through this process. I think that what makes ABC really special. Sorry, they didn't tell me that I could, get on a soapbox, but I feel like, just the collaboration with unhoused residents and learning from and really taking into account their wisdom and lived experience has been, part of what sets ABC apart from other kind of city-funded or, kind of nonprofit, top-down solutions to homelessness. So.
The one sense is the feeling that you get from accomplishment. You want to share it with everyone. So if I had a job, I'm trying to get other people around me to get jobs too. And did have a job position that really allowed that, especially in the unhoused section. A lot of people have difficulty stepping into that work environment. And the job I had actually really helped quite a few people. So I hope to continue
And I think we have some time for questions, so if folks want to.
Thanks a lot. The question is, you showed like a beautiful layout of the community that could be built. So where it's not just the houses, but I don't know, there's all kind of utilities and kitchen. And so what's your estimate for like the budget of that? Let's say just the buildings is one. I assume then it's serviced by volunteers. And have you actually already started building that, or is that sort of the future goal? Yeah, where are you at with that?
Cool, thank you for the question. And yeah, we're pretty fresh with the DAO. We're only a couple months in, and that's our vision, is to grow into that. And as for capturing costs, that's something that we've done pretty good job on. Still securing land, that's a big question mark, but we have a nice pathway with that. But yeah, that's kind of our goal at this point. That's more of like a conceptual design based off of feedback from residents and other community organizers.
What's the estimate of like how much you need for that?
Financially?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of things to factor in. $500,000 potentially, but then with that too is we're trying to hire from within the community as much as possible for as many of the roles. And that way there's more buy-in too, and then accountability throughout the community. And, but yeah, as for the numbers, that's really in development.
Really inspirational, thanks. I'm wondering, could you speak a little bit to some common roadblocks as far as the kind of working your way through some of the red tape that we found, like maybe some best practices and things like that?
Red tape in building the community, or I would say the NIMBYs are going to be a challenge. So we have a plan. We're going to make sure that we have good relationships with them, and maybe Dan could talk a little bit more on this.
Yeah, so NIMBY is definitely important, and then even before that is zoning and permitting.
Could you explain what NIMBY stands for?
Yeah, great question for anyone that doesn't know. It stands for Not My Backyard. So if you purchase a plot of land and if you build similarly to everyone around, that's gonna be welcomed more than likely. But if you're bringing in a transitional community, people are gonna view that a certain way, with potentially crime coming to the neighborhood or drug dealing, etc. So there's a lot of fear that comes into play. And with that specific item, that's something we feel really we need to be super proactive with, and doing community outreach and potential community engagement or collaboration. So the space that we're envisioning, having educational workshops is a big part of the design that we're working on. So that could be something where there's relationships with nearby neighbors and could potentially even provide employment within the neighborhood. But there's two different potentials. There's it could be up in the hills, which is really far away from everything, or it could be more urban, which can be more convenient for the residents that it's being built for. And yeah, there's pros and cons to both of them. In the urban environment, it can be great for access to public transportation and more accessible to resources for the residents. And then there's also the land opportunities in the Bay Area are slim. Even with checking out land too in Oakland, which we've been exploring, one thing that we need to look into, which is something that we're trying to get a map on, is gang territory, because that's something that needs to be definitely acknowledged.
Hi, so I'm here today to kind of learn about DAO and also, just really the application to, homelessness. So I have maybe two questions. One is, as you're creating the DAO, like who are considered as members of this DAO, like are residents and then volunteers included, or like just kind of help me. Would love to understand who will be considered as members of this community. And then second is what will be the funding model look like? Because I see, the numbers, the budgets of the mismanaged budget, right? Like there's a huge number there. Like, is there a plan in place to help maybe get some of the funding through, existing budget? Or is it going to continue to rely on the GoFundMe, the private donor? I understand numbers being worked out, but also wanted to just understand what are some of the financing strategies behind it.
Cool, great question. And as for DAO members, that's something that's still being explored. It would be great to have residents participate within it. At the very least, there needs to be one resident advisor part of it, in my opinion. And beyond that, for the funding, that's something that's still being developed. And the previous model that we've worked from, that was pre-DAO. And what we're moving into now is a collaboration with GeoBrowser. And as for the funding with that, the vision is to have the first proof of concept model funded with crypto. And then beyond that, we'll be exploring more traditional with grants, etc.
Hello, thank you all for your work. It's great to see Dan. I actually live in a tiny house at Youth Spirit Artworks, which is the only youth shelter, unfortunately, currently in Oakland. I'm the operations manager there. And so they were coming to see the work that we're doing with the youth there. Two questions that I have because of the learning curve in my own experience, having lived there for a year. First, as an African American, I certainly have my own opinion, which I won't share here. Well, we have to get out at a certain period. But what have you thought about in terms of your practices as regards de-escalation, speaking of those NIMBYs, de-escalation and your relationship, good, bad, or otherwise, which you will have to have with the Oakland Police Department. What are your thoughts about that? Because we've tried to implement a compassionate care model. We don't DOS people, denial of service, throw people out like all other shelters do, but that comes with other challenges if you don't do that. And then secondly, since your target audience is 25 to 40, I'm wondering, do you work with coordinated entry, or how is it that participants gain access to the houses in the first place? And again, thank you so much for your work.
Okay, so the first question was how we're going to approach situations that come up. So definitely a de-escalation model. We're gonna have at least one trained resident or housed individual on site to offer that resource. And we're gonna have security too. Mostly security is gonna be to prevent outsiders from coming in to steal stuff, for example. But yeah, the goal is gonna be always using mental health services and non-police. Initially, if there's weapons, we're gonna have to, unfortunately. But yeah, as much as we can, get close to this community, have everyone hold each other accountable. We're gonna have the expectations drawn up by all residents at the beginning, and we're gonna work towards having a no violence tolerance at all. We have to be compassionate with people, but this is what other transitional housing options they fail at. People get in fights, people steal each other's stuff, people harass one another, and of course they're going through mental health challenges, but you have to be kind to one another. So yeah, de-escalation and the security on site and using as many other resources before OPD.
And another question you had too regarding the DOS, super inspired by what you all are doing at Youth Spirit Artworks. That's already forefront. We have a goal in having partnerships with other organizations. So if a resident comes in, it doesn't turn out to be a great fit on their end or our end, that we have another option for them to try out. And then ideally, they're able to find the help that they need and go through some healing.
Can I actually ask you if you just have any, experience with youth works that you would offer in response to, I guess, the questions that you asked?
Yes.
Well, I was unprepared for that. The thing that I have learned in DOS, for people who don't know, great question, denial of service is a policy that's actually implemented at every shelter in the Bay Area, which means that if you engage in violence, if you hurt somebody, all of your belongings are packed up and you are asked to leave immediately, and security escorts you out. It doesn't matter what time of day it is, it doesn't matter if it's raining, nobody cares whether you have a phone or access to be able to remove all of your belongings if there's friends or other people in the shelter that have the rest of what you have. That part has been really spiritually hard and difficult though, because just within the past few weeks, we've had participants throw chairs through glass windows, for example. Well, then you as an organization have to eat that cost, and your stakeholders will be like, well, what about all the things that stakeholders will ask you? Today, we had an almost altercation, we'll call it that, an almost altercation. And we try really hard to implement trauma-informed care, which means that we do not throw people out, even if, and I understand the zero tolerance policy, but I've really had to be in a lot of prayer about that, because if the whole idea is to intervene and to act as a space of refuge and sanctuary for people that have already carried so much trauma, and thank you so much to the ministry that I would call it, that you offer about your own experience. People who've already, that's why we're doing the work in the first place. And so to re-traumatize them by now throwing them out after they feel finally I'm settled and I have my own key, we're really cognizant about the responsibility of that. And we have many very long staff meetings about that. So certainly in your journey, I hope we can have many more conversations together. But trauma-informed care is really hard, which is why almost no shelters do it. That's why they just throw people out for any violations. And so that's the thing that I've really learned the most. And I think that when you bring in security, the only other thing that I would add is when we bring in security, having trauma-informed trainings for security as well, because for many security persons, we found they weren't a good fit, to use what Dan said earlier. They weren't a good fit because for them, it was just a job. And they didn't understand anything about the population that they were serving. And so for us, it's really important that all of our partners, top to bottom, understand that you are here to serve them. That's why you are here. And if you're only here for a job, then it's probably not a good fit, because you're not going to take the extra time if there is an outburst of some sort. And we'd like to try to remind all of our vendors that this is the audience that we serve. They've been severely traumatized. And if you're expecting that this is going to be a college campus and everybody's just going to be rating Play-Doh, that's not what's going to happen. You're going to be really disappointed. So to be realistic, understand who we serve and why, and just to remember the why. So again, thank you all so much for your work with us. It's hard. And I'll end really by saying the self-care part is super important, because I live there around the clock. And so being able to stand in all of that, it's like living in the Tenderloin, kind of, with all the trauma that's around all the time. You have to be able to find a way to care for people without lashing out at their trauma and what they're trying to deal with. And if you really sit down and you have restorative justice circles and you do that with people and you take time to just listen, that makes all the difference in the world. It sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. So thank you so much for your work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just to address that, the homeless encampments, at least the encampment that I was living at, and that was just the last one where I met Anne-Marie, and I've lived in numerous camps. The community that's built there, and it is a community, absolute, without a doubt. We all take care of each other, meaning, sure, we are dealing within the community with the folks that have disconnections. We'll use that term, disconnections. One person starts a fire, does it again, and does it again, has definitely a long road to work their way through. And it's up to us to help him. And we do. But outside of that, the world outside does not understand. And they don't realize that we're handling all of these problems. It's something that comes with time, comes with love, nurturing. And if you love people, you just can't help but be there for them. So I understand what you're talking about, this whole eviction, because I've seen it and I've been through it myself, where they will just pack your stuff up and just drag your trailer out. They'll just literally run over, like if you have a generator in front of your trailer, they will pull right over it and anything else in the way and just like take you out on the street and leave you right there. And it is the most, one of the ugliest things I've ever experienced, right next to somebody stealing somebody's property when they went to jail. So we're looking at, within the community, we're fighting both sides. I love people. You can always learn something from them. So there's no concern there. I mean, if that's your biggest worry there, you can't help but know that we will take care of those. And the zero tolerance, it starts out like that, or at least they say that, but that's, that doesn't exist. Or else nobody would be there.
I feel like we all just kind of have to learn good manners, and everybody has to be on the same page. So it's important that we practice good manners for those of us that know some manners. I'm not saying that one's better than the other. Just I think we need to educate everyone the good practices. How to mingle with the men and women, the differences between men and women. Fork is on the right. That type of thing. Answering the phone, basic stuff like that. Toilet paper, don't steal the toilet paper. And I think that is so important. It's vital to us actually breaking through this whole concept of we're stuck. And I really believe that's so important because it usually starts in the home, and the home is broken down so far now. Where do you go? Who's going to teach you? So I would really think that that's all important. Just good manners can really go a long way. Just like one positive word of support.
I'm over in the back. I had a couple questions. One was, what are the other groups that you guys interact with? I'm not super familiar with the space, how insular is the wrong word, but what are the other groups that ABC interacts with versus you guys just operating as your own kind of community offering services? And then second group of questions would be, what are ways that we could get involved? Maybe at 3 different levels would be helpful, no time, but just finances, on small amount of time, but at regular intervals. And then if people just have, I don't know, off hours at random times, on a non-regular basis, what would be ways that we could get involved?
So the community organizations that we've partnered with within the existing camps in Oakland and Berkeley, Lifelong Medical, they are amazing. They've housed more people than any of these city governments total. I think they housed you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were wonderful.
So pretty much it's activist nurses that go into the camps so people don't have to travel to them. And I highly recommend this organization. They're incredible people. They're the real deal. And for food services, punks with lunch, and they also provide harm reduction. Same thing, they come straight into the camps. They wheelbarrow in all the supplies for everyone weekly. And then there's a lot of activist dental services and resources for pets too. You probably know more community supports in the camp, organizations doing good stuff.
Oh yeah, I can't even recall the names, but there's so many that come in and then they go out, they come in, they go out, and there's without each and every one of these small organizations, they have helped us through, in quite a few ways. They started just first by having just hand washing stations, just a little bucket with you foot pump it, and that was the first thing that I saw on site down on Wood Street. Yeah, that's and then they had little meetings about what we could do to make things better, and people started to come together, and more organizations came, and then we had a problem with too many organizations leaving food. Then we had it's just there's so many of these small organizations that are just vital in getting things started. But as far as ABC goes, it's no doubt in my mind that with or without support, city support or state support, that they will be successful regardless. I'm not even sure if city support or the government to me right now has failed me in all aspects. It's just really heartbreaking, but and Anne-Marie and Dan and their group have always been around. Just even when they're not building, they show up. They have little parties, little gatherings, whether we are there to support them or not. They could just be their group, but they're still there, faithfully every single weekend. It's a good thing. It's positive support. So absolutely, they're going to be successful. And the city gave what $4 something million to build a small, I don't know how many structures it was, 50 structures. And keep in mind, Wood Street encampment had over 200 people living there. I'm certain it was way more than that, but for 50 structures, $4.5 or $4.6 million, they built these structures. For 3 years, we get the lease. 3 years, and then that's it. The camp is gone. Everything else is gone. If ABC had use of that money, God, can't even tell you that could turn the world around. It really could. So, communities or any organizations that want to join them, I would definitely say you're on the right path.
Do you have any feedback on the rest of Jake's question about how we could contribute and support?
Sure.
So I appreciate your question about like the 3 levels. Is there like financial ways, time commitments, different ways that people could support?
Yeah, I think right now, financial ways that'll come up as the DAOs evolves a bit more. And then beyond that, for time, once we do have a warehouse space secured for a winter build, we'd love to have you join us. It's a super fun experience. It's all inclusive, all ages and skill levels welcomed. And yeah, what was the third item?
The third was just 3 different ways that people could help. If it was, a small commitment of time, a larger commitment of time, or maybe no time but only financial.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think as we develop, here we go.
But just also on the tech side, because I think we have like a pretty diverse group of people here. But if you are in tech or Web3, we're going to be looking to build DAOs and integrate DAO tooling for a lot of these sorts of things. And not everyone, people that are working in this space aren't necessarily prolific, proficient in Solidity and in identity solutions and all of these kinds of things. So we do meet regularly. I know Jake comes to our We Heart SF meetups where we talk about both policy and also starting to like design DAOs. We just had one last week on mentorship DAO design. How can we help connect people to mentors, for example. And there's going to be a lot of these types of ideas that we kind of flesh out designs for what could be helpful, and then we're going to need people to build them. And we're working on the funding side of that, but if anybody is an engineer, is technical, wants to help build these things, and partner up with people who are working in this field and know what would be helpful, please show up to these events.
Thank you for sharing you guys' story of purpose growing out of a crisis, especially being an Oakland resident and seeing the crisis from infancy to full-on explosion has been very disheartening. So definitely diving in and giving your time, life, work to this is just greatly appreciated. My question is, you started off the slide showing the mismanagement of funds and the hope of DAOs in solving the transparency challenge. Can you speak to, you guys are evangelizing, housing as a right, Can you also speak to the conversation of the mismanagement and the hope of this technology in addressing it amongst the organization that you're working with?
Yeah. Sorry, I might have missed part of that, but for the
So he was asking how DAOs can help add more transparency to funds being spent. And I don't know if we can influence how the Oakland government spends their money, at least not yet.
But with that, within this space, there is a push for getting into policy change. And I think that's where there could be nice overlap. And then for governments actually adapting to the technology, it is happening on a statewide level. It's happening with the DMV for tracking records, and to see it as a possibility for tracking local government's funds. I can't say I'm super hopeful that that'll be happening anytime soon, or that it won't be like, yeah, kind of a smoke and mirrors. But yeah, I'm not really sure what direction that will go.
The good news is that the government, not only do they have taxpayer dollars, but they go after grants, private grants. So if we can prove our concept, we can snatch those grants away from the government mismanaging these funds.
Thank you so much. I have a question that's really related to the one that was just asked. But I also wanted to name some of the organizations in San Francisco that are doing similar work, and if other people have them, please share. But like the Coalition on Homelessness, Food Not Bombs, St. James Infirmary that works with sex workers. There's a constellation of like radical neighborhood organizations that are growing up. I know one called Rad Mission Neighbors. There's another called Coal Valley Hate Street Allies. So just that there's similar orgs here in SF. You guys are spending so much time and energy on the work that you're doing when the government has really failed on this issue, and you know you have enough on your plate. So I don't mean this question from a place of like should at all, but more just on your perspective of what are the legislative or like policy facing fronts that you're seeing folks that you're organizing with push on, like whether in Oakland, whether at the state level, like are there legislative issues that seem promising that some of your community members are pushing on, you know, on that outward facing level, even as you are doing the work to like handle it ourselves when those services have failed?
It's a good question. The only thing that really comes to mind is a poet and activist named Tiny, who runs Homefulness, has been instrumental in actually getting permanent affordable housing buildings built. And the red tape that they have to go through just for a development that is affordable versus a market rate, because the government they're not in bed with those developers. They're in bed with the slumlords. So that's the main challenge that I've seen on the ground, where it took so much money and so much extra time, and they kept moving the goalpost back just to get this actually built. So figuring out a way to greenlight affordable housing that's actually affordable and not just 10% of the building so that they can have a tax write-off would be a great thing to focus on.
Can I possibly say something real quick about that? As my coffee wears off, but this is important. Something that I pinned because it was said earlier from the panel is that you're expecting that your program model will be a year long. Just know that one of the things and one of the policy implementations and changes that needs to be made at the municipal level is that the city will want you to cut that in half. The city will want you to bring people in who've been severely traumatized and magically transform them into productive members of society in less than 6 months. even though technically in order to be categorized as homeless, they have been on the street in many cases for a year. So you're supposed to end, like for one day, for every 2 days of trauma, the math doesn't work, and our outcomes say that in our program, if you've been there more than 6 months, you have a 7x more likelihood that you will end up in permanent housing. And if the program is shortened for the sake of trying to get a higher volume of people into the program, you're actually undercutting the outcomes that you're looking for. So one of the policy edges, I would say, that is absolutely vital to the program is being able to be effective in the first place. Once we go through all the work of building it, finding people, getting them in, organizing all of the constellation of actors, is that the city not try to shorten those programs to such a point that they're basically kneecapped. And you can't then produce any outcomes because you don't have the time that it takes because you're dealing with a traumatized population. So that's what I would think is one of the most urgent policy needs in terms of pressuring the council to make those changes so that the funding assumes that the programs are at least a year or longer, but not any shorter than a year.
That 6-month requirement is in order to get the funding?
In order to get the funding, the city wants to be able to post that it's a really, unfortunately, there is a chicken and egg problem, which is that the city knows that there's a numerical problem, the number of people. That's what's being reported, that's all the headlines, the number of people. The other problem is that the city says, well, in order to get the number of people lower, what we're going to do is we're going to develop programs that can basically fish tank people. So that it's much larger groups, putting 2 people in one room, that's exactly why they do that. So that they'll be able to report that actually it's a much higher number of people that we're dealing with. But the problem is you're dealing with human beings and you have to have some degree of personal one-on-one with them. Or if you haven't heard their stories, they haven't articulated who they are, how are they supposed to untangle all this horrible stuff that's just happened to them? And so the city has, unfortunately, and I want to name myself as being somewhat responsible for that, and asking that the numbers get better, or that it's so horrible we want the numbers to get better, there can be a bit of an unintended consequence of causing cities to implement policies that are actually contrary to the outcome that we want, right? So there's this strange tension in policy, specifically as regards shelters that are classified as emergency shelters, which these kinds of programs are. Ours is emergency shelter, and yours sounds like it would be emergency shelter. So all the programs need to be at least a year, but not a day shorter. And the city will fight you tooth and nail to say that they want it to be 6 months or 7 months or 8 months so that you can cycle more people in.
We do things conversational style here, so hijack a little bit. I do think and hope that, that is maybe part of the benefit of doing this, through DAOs instead of kind of through the city is, we don't have those same necessary limitations. Another question you raised earlier was, if they're working with coordinated entry for, getting people in. I know there's city requirements for that. Is part of maybe why you were asking that question, that you think that there are limitations with the coordinated entry system and who they refer over to these housing solutions, and where are you seeing maybe underserved communities or people where you think they're not getting referred that should be getting referred?
This really is my last time, really. If I get it again, somebody just take it. The way the coordinated entry, and I understand the logic, you get all these weird formulaic numbers assigned to you based on your trauma load and all these numbers, then you go higher on a level. Once you're at the top of the list, you get picked, and there can be an interview process of some sort, but one of the unfortunate intended, I would say, not unintended, one of the intended consequences of CES, the coordinated entry system, is that you can't say no. So you said something earlier that, again, I pinned. If somebody's a good fit for our community, but with coordinated entry, you can't do that.
Right.
You can't say, no, we can't. So no matter how neurodiverse, and we can't actually help them. No matter whether somebody is on a behavioral chart where you don't have the resources and they're just going to come in and have all these negative reactions that you have no ability to handle, you can't say no. So one of the challenges with coordinated entry is that it puts you in a bind because now you have to spend the resources. Added security, which is going to cost you $34 an hour, which is not in your budget. And so we do all these things because we want to get the most vulnerable people again, because the citizens are saying we can't have people out on the street, which I understand, but the unintended consequence is now the organization boots on the ground doing the work is left with getting assigned people that are not a good fit for your model. Because if you have all these beautiful maker spaces, it requires a certain kind of person that can deal with the responsibility and what the community framework is. And if you can't do that, we have to have some agency to say no, but the city will say no. So yeah, I hope DAOs and more decentralized models will afford you to have more agency and self-determination so that you can shape your community.
Yes, thank you very much. What do you think is like the most important and unique feature of DAOs that enables you to achieve better results than without DAOs?
And I think it just comes down to transparency. The amount of money, the amount of dollars that are wasted by local governments, and the amount of impact that could be created if they were used in an efficient manner and in alignment with the residents they're serving. I think, we could be living in a different world right now. And right now, for my knowledge of DAOs and how they operate and everything, transparency is the driving.
So basically, you track all the expenses. Thank you very much. My understanding is that you track all the expenses on a very granular, detailed level. This is the answer, right? Okay, maybe just another one, which is the second and best other features that you have that makes it so successful what you are doing.
One of the other features, trying to think of, I guess, self-governance, using the DAO model within the community itself. There'll be an experiment, but developing a self-governing community to a degree, with some outside participation. But on the level of agreements, we feel it's very important for the residents to have a large say in how the direction of the community goes, and using a DAO model in order to guide that, which was really powerful.
Can you guys explain to me? Give me just because I'm completely illiterate in that aspect, in that area. Like DAO, what is it? What does it do? What's it capable of doing? Or why is it like all important? Why is everything centered around it right now?
Yeah, it's kind of like a co-op. You're familiar with co-ops? Just like an equal playing field, but it's using technology to ideally have someone else can probably describe this better than me, but have a co-op that's able to function on its own without any human intervention. Yeah.
Huh. It's interesting. I'm trying to envision it. So everything's equal.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's interesting.
And you can see everything that everyone has done in the past. So it's scary. It's eliminating corruption is the goal.
Oh, you mean so being honest.
Mm-hmm.
Keeps everything honest. Okay. Okay. Ouch. No wonder the government doesn't want to work with you. All right.
Yes, thank you for everything. I have two types of questions. The first is a bit maybe weird, but I'm not from here, and I'm really curious to. I don't want to feel make me feel entitled, but you talked a lot about the problem of the slow bureaucracy with money. What's the reason behind that thought as far as why they don't care? Because, for example, I'm from Switzerland. We had this really big problem, and maybe I want to talk also maybe later with you, because I studied that, and basically Switzerland was really passionate about their image outside the world, and we had one of the worst heroin crises in the 80s, and one place in Switzerland made the top of New York Times, and the government was like, oh, we have to change our image, so they started to spend. And why does the government doesn't care about the image? I'm really curious to know. I know it's a bit of but I don't. And the second is more about how you deal maybe with the universities. I don't know if you are in contact with universities, because I feel like your model is really interesting for governance and a different type of governance. And I mean, it's horrible to say it like that, but this is basic social research that is really interesting for the future of policies. And I wonder if you ever got in contact with universities, if because like I feel like it's a really perfect place to shape new governance through DAO, for example. So if you have thought about getting funds, or maybe you are against that for some reasons. And the last thing about more DAOs, I forgot it. Sorry.
Maybe it'll come up as we're talking.
Yeah, as for local governments not caring about their image in these situations, it's really tricky. Obviously, according to probably most of us here, we would think that we'd want, if we were in these roles, we'd want to create a positive impact. And for myself, how I view it is that there are these issues, and that's generating a lot of revenue that is paying people salaries. And if these issues are eliminated, a lot of those jobs and salaries are wiped out. I wish they would care more. It's pretty heartbreaking, especially, right now, the city of Oakland has a new mayor that took office who experienced homelessness herself. So hope there's some change. Not holding my breath on it, but we need new models. And when the government doesn't take action, we need to take action.
Just speaking to how governments seem to not care at all, I think I found that often some people who are working in local governments do care, but the bureaucratic structures are designed to, prevent any type of risk, prevent any creative solutions. So even if people have the best intentions at heart, there's no structure like there is in a kind of more open or new type of organization to take those kinds of risks that would create a really, innovative solution. So I think one of the things that folks are trying to do with this DAO is create a transparent and accountable case study or proof of concept that folks can look at and say, wow, the government mismanaged $80 million. Here's what these folks did with $700K, and then after that, it becomes a lot easier. After you've had a success, it's a lot easier to, point to that success than it is to try and convince the city to do something new. So there's been a lot of success, kind of block by block fights with housed allies, helping people stay in their camps. Even the success of Wood Street over time was, in part due to the fact that they were there already and weren't going to leave. And, that becomes a lot harder to say no to than trying to get the city to try something new. So,
It's kind of like a war that you guys are starting here. Because they say when one person's honest, everyone down the line has to be honest too. So I don't see the city, Oakland at least, and I'm directly speaking about Oakland, although I know it filters out throughout the United States and perhaps the world. I don't know if I forgot where I was at. But it's a war. I don't, you're gonna come across like more and more obstacles, and certainly the first thought that I was thinking, and I heard him mention something about institutions, I was thinking, well, what if it became more of an educational program rather than, 2-year course to get in radiology, that's 2 years. So at the end of 2 years, you pop out with a certificate and you're able to go to work. So that might be something. But that was just, off the top. We'll see what happens. But
If you're up for a good fight, you're gonna wanna join these guys.
Hey guys, quick question, thank you all. I may have missed it. The cost of to build one of the homes, and then also what is the square footage about or the size of the community, the whole community? And are you only working with public land, or are you also working with private lots that people may have in the city?
So yeah, the current design we have for the tiny homes, for building the shell of them, it comes out to around $3,000. And that includes building out the structures, painting them, and then with our previous model, the control of the interior design that was on the resident. They could be creative, they could loft it out. And with our new model, that's something where we're gonna explore a potential partnership with an interior design firm to see if there's any room for collaboration. And as for the footprint from our current home, I believe it's 12 by 14. And then for a footprint for the whole community, that's still being developed as we're still looking for land in order to really solidify that. And definitely open to both public and private. And we're trying to avoid any partnership with the city, if needed, just from the experience that Youth Spirit Artworks is having. Super impressed that there's been no denial of services in the situation that you're in, so props for that. Ideally, for us to work towards developing a proof of concept, we won't have to go through such great challenges.